This will be to show you what we are currently working on. And we are currently working on a new training called intermediate training. The full name is MidPoint Deployment Intermediate Configuration Training, but let's shorten it to intermediate training. In this presentation, it will be not just a presentation, it will be, of course, a live demo, but we will start with introducing our training curriculum, which is work in progress, to have some kind of context of this intermediate training, and maybe also to provoke some ideas from your side, which trainings you would like to see in the future. So I will briefly share that. After that, I will introduce the intermediate training. Then we will have the training preview as a live demo, and finally conclusion and discussion. So I will start with our training curriculum. The training curriculum has several packages, and we are now concentrating on deployment courses. So first steps is what you probably are aware of. This is the training which was released last year and is based on the MidPoint 4.8. Group synchronization training and intermediate configuration training are already in development, so I will talk about this one. And you are probably also aware of connector development training, which is from our development courses. You can see the other packages. You can also see the ideas. So these are the ideas which we work with and which we probably use as a basis for future trainings. But this is as it is at this moment, and I will talk about intermediate configuration training. So it is a deployment course. What are the main goals? The main goals of intermediate training are to extend the usage of first steps methodology. In this training, you will extend MidPoint schema using schema extension, and you will use the schema extension properties in mappings. You will also learn how to configure MidPoint to use multiple account types for provisioning of, for example, privileged accounts. You will learn MidPoint query language, which you probably have already seen, but this is a great place to also make yourself, okay, maybe expert in it. You will also learn a MidPoint object language to describe MidPoint objects. This is what you know if you were working with MidPoint before in XML, and to understand configuration from previous training or trainings. Then we will use MidPoint Studio. MidPoint Studio is a tool which we also provide. I will introduce it a bit later, and we will use it, or you will use it in this training, to download, review, and upload MidPoint configuration. We are doing it as well as a cleanup of that configuration, because we would like to store the configuration in Git. We would like to show you that it is a good idea and why. And you will also use MidPoint Studio to compare and synchronize configuration objects between MidPoint repository and MidPoint project. This all we are doing to introduce Streamlined support for MidPoint deployment using GitOps. This was something which was commonly requested during trainings that we had, and we realized that we would like to have a training for that. Except of this, in the training, you will also learn how you can configure and use email notifications, including HTML support and attachments. You will see how you can use live synchronization. And last but not least, how to use bulk actions for bulk operations on MidPoint data, and how to use logging and tracing to troubleshoot MidPoint configuration. This training is prepared for MidPoint 4.9. So as this is not yet released, what you will see is based on a snapshot of MidPoint and snapshot of MidPoint Studio. I have put here this slide. These are basically the modules from the training. I will not talk much about it because the questions or the objectives which was on the previous slides are basically taken from here. I just wanted to have something which you will see the PDF later, so we can get back to that information. And these two modules are what I would like to emphasize: MidPoint object language and MidPoint configuration management, because this will be like the core of the training. Yes, we are doing also some other things, but what we were trying to do is from user interface to come to management of the configuration in Studio, and this is the core. Okay, so would you like to see some teasers, I have few screenshots before we come to the live demo. So in MidPoint 4.9, you have option to create and manage the schema extension directly from user interface. If you have already modified MidPoint configuration to use schema extension, you know you needed to create XSD file. So starting with MidPoint 4.9, you don't need to do that because you can create the schema extension directly in user interface, of course, without restarting MidPoint, which is great. So this is what will be also part of the training. Then if you are creating a new object type in XML, it is quite easy to do a copy paste. But if you are starting with first steps and you would like to do it in a user interface, starting with MidPoint 4.9, you can create a duplicate of object type. So we have, for example, a normal account in LDAP, and we can duplicate it to create a copy of it. Of course, you need to modify some things inside, but you don't need to type all of the mappings and all of the synchronization configuration, because parts of it will be probably reusable from the other object type. So that's possible in user interface. Also, there is a new feature. The preview changes has been enhanced with also preview with development configuration, which we are also using in the training. But not just that, I mentioned queries. So our query language, which we formerly introduced as Axiom query language, but now we are commonly just saying just the query language, can be used quite easily even for some more complex queries. Here you can see that it can contain quite complex query, yet it is readable. So there is no XML in this, it is quite readable. So one of the modules will be about learning this language. And not just that, in MidPoint Studio, we currently have even completion of the items in the search queries and also with the filter names. So this is currently possible partially in MidPoint Studio and not everywhere, but in browse objects and in object collection views. But we expect that this will be supported in 4.9 in MidPoint if possible. So currently it is limited to this. And now I would like to switch to this core of the intermediate training, which is why we have originally started with it, and that's the Streamlined support for MidPoint deployment using GitOps. So if you started with MidPoint years ago, you probably were already using MidPoint Studio. So you probably are aware of XML files which you can upload. Or you can work just starting last year with a first steps methodology in user interface, where you don't see any XML and you are doing everything in UI. Both methods are okay. But eventually, you would like to store the configuration in Git repository, maybe just to be able to revert to some previous version of configuration, or to use it as a basis for other environments, not just the one where you have edited it. So for that, we need something we call cleanup. I will introduce that. And once the configuration is cleaned, you can put it into Git and it can be uploaded to other environments using GitOps pipelines. So here is the basic schema. In this basic schema, we have a MidPoint Studio. We have a local development MidPoint. It could be on the same workstation where the developer is working. And then we have production MidPoint and all other, so acceptance testing, whatever. And if the customer, if the organization has the GitOps pipeline and all the configuration, this is of course organization specific, there will be Git repository between Studio and the GitOps. So what the developer can do, developer of the configuration of MidPoint, they can either create the XML files with the configuration and upload it to local development MidPoint, test it and upload it again and so on. So working in iterations. Or you can modify the configuration directly in user interface and download it to XML file in MidPoint Studio. But you can do also the cleanup. So I will introduce here the cleanup in this presentation, because this cleanup helps you to have a better configuration, or let's say more suitable configuration in these XML files, which you eventually put into Git. So if you put these XML files to Git, you have everything what is supported by Git, like branches and merging and cooperation of multiple team members and conflict resolution, reverting of previous versions, and so on and so on. And if you have Git repository and you or your customer has GitOps pipelines configured, then automatic upload of configuration to MidPoint, either production or other, might follow. So this is something which is organization specific, but what we need to do is prepare the configuration and store it in Git. Also, we have, since starting with MidPoint 4.9, support for secrets. So the passwords don't need to be stored in the configuration anymore, like we needed to do it before, and it was always not very comfortable using, I don't know, properties or encrypted properties. Now we can use secrets such as Docker secrets, so we don't need to specify the passwords at all. We are only referring to the secrets such as Docker secrets from the MidPoint and also from other configuration pieces. So I will show that when we come to the live demo. When we are talking about the cleanup, why and what can be cleaned? Basically, this is a fragment of resource. Basically, metadata and operational data usually don't need to be stored in Git. So that can be stripped away. Also, connector references. Connector references are using OIDs of the connectors. If you are using only UI, there will be only OID, there will be no query. But this is not portable, so we need to get rid of that. Schema definition, resource schema definition. Usually you don't need to store it in Git because it will be always refreshed when you are doing test connection. The schema will be put into resource, so we don't need it usually. And as I mentioned, encrypted passwords, this is not portable, and associations based on shadow OID. So for example, roles created in the MidPoint, which are pointing to specific entitlements, this is also not portable. So all this can be, let's say, fixed. And how do we do that? How do we do that fix? How do we do that cleanup? We can use MidPoint Studio for that. So MidPoint Studio is not just to manage your configuration, not just to upload and download, but also to do the cleanup. And when you do the cleanup, you can use Git to store the cleaned configuration in Git repository. And if you have GitOps, GitOps can use Git contents to manage MidPoint configuration in other environments. So MidPoint Studio introduction in 60 seconds, just in case some of you have never seen MidPoint Studio in action. Basically, it is IntelliJ IDEA plugin. So we are not reinventing the wheel. We are using IntelliJ IDEA and plugin. It uses MidPoint REST API to communicate with MidPoint. You can create multiple projects in IntelliJ IDEA, and you can have multiple project environments for each of them, like production, test, acceptance, if you would like to access it directly. You can browse or you can search for MidPoint objects, so through the REST API. You can download or you can upload MidPoint objects using MidPoint Studio. You can use this cleanup and object synchronization actions, which I will introduce here and show in demo. Also, there is bulk task creation wizard, so you can create bulk task, let's say, more easily. And of course, it is IntelliJ IDEA, so it is integrated development environment which already supports Git integration. So that's provided there. All right, so let's introduce MidPoint Studio Cleanup, because this is new, or there was cleanup before, but it is something completely new. So using the cleanup, you can clean either one or multiple files at once, even directories, and there could be automatic actions or there could be additional cleanup actions. The automatic actions are selectable. This is piece of configuration of Studio. Some of these actions are with confirmation. So the cleanup can remove metadata and operational properties. It can remove resource schema definition, but there is a confirmation dialog by default. It can remove connector references. So if you would like to get rid of OIDs, it can be removed, but it can be also replaced by query. So instead of OID, there will be query, which is of course now portable. And also, if you are cleaning file which contains references to other objects by OIDs, and you don't have these objects in your repository yet, It can show you warnings, and even you can do handling, but I will show you that in a minute. Additional cleanup actions are the password and associations, but we will get to them. You will see this in the demo. So this is just basically if you would like to review this later, or if you are looking at the PDF and would like to see the screenshots. So cleanup action can detect missing referenced objects which you don't yet have in your project in Studio. And you can either download everything which is missing, which you probably don't want, but you can decide what you would like to download to your project using configure missing. So I will show you this. This is missing referenced objects. And finally, how to clean up the association and passwords. So association, if you have, this is from role, role which is referring to specific group in a specific resource. It looks like this. This is not portable. Shadow OID is not portable. So using Studio, you can convert it to association target search by the distinguished name, for example, of the group. So this is something which will also help you make your role-like objects portable. And finally, the password. So if you are working already with, for example, LDAP, you know that bind password looks like this, which is, again, not portable because this key is different in each environment. So it is reversibly encrypted using a key, but that key is not present in other environments. So what can you do? Well, Studio will help you because you can configure that you would like to use one of the secrets providers. One of them, which is supported, is Docker. So Docker secret, and let's call it my Docker secrets. And then the bind password definition in the resource would look like this. You will just change it to external data element and just mention the identifier of the provider. And this is the Docker secret name, how it is configured in Docker. Of course, it is stored physically in the resource. So if you look at the bind password in the user interface, it will look like this. There will be not password stored in the resource anymore. This will be stored here, the reference to provider and the key. So now it is portable and of course much safer because you don't have the password in your configuration. And last thing to show you before we come to demo is object synchronization. So you probably remember that very long time ago, we used always upload method. So we created configuration in XML and uploaded it from Studio. But then we created first steps methodology where we start with user interface, no XML, no Studio. So you can do whatever you want to make MidPoint your best friend and to test everything you would like to test and deploy. But sooner or later, you will need to manage the configuration also in XML because not everything is possible in UI. And even worse, or let's say more complicated, is sometimes you will need to manage some configuration in UI and some in XML in Studio. So upload only or download only decision is not always correct or not always possible because you could override your data and configuration data. So we have created synchronized object action in MidPoint Studio, especially to help engineers, and this replaces the original remote diff action. Maybe you have used that. Again, screenshot how this object synchronization looks, but we will have this in demo. So this is again just for reference if you are looking at this in form of PDF. So now we have the live demo. So I will switch to browser. This is our training web page when we have MidPoint, which is already populated with users. If you have already had the chance to take first steps training, it might look familiar. So we have already data here. I will show you first how the schema extension looks like in user interface. So schema extension, I can try to even zoom a bit the screen. Schema extension can be now seen as a configuration in user interface. So we can see the name of the schema extension and its namespace. And in the definitions, we can see that we are extending user with country code and country properties. These are the display names, their order. They are both indexed, so we can search upon these attributes. This look and feel might change. This is a snapshot of MidPoint, so I was I was notified by my colleagues from development that this is maybe not the final version, but the information about schema extension is already here. So you don't need to go to XSD file, you can do it here. Changes are immediately active, no restart is needed. Then I would like to show, but only partially, how or where you can do this duplication. I will not do that because we don't have so much time. But if you go, better will be here, schema handling. In schema handling, and we have, for example, just one type of account support in Active Directory. In the training, we are using the duplicate action. So in duplicate action, you are prompted with basically wizard for creation of new object type, but you need to change the things, and of course you would need to provide a different intent, and then you configure in the configuration of the object type, but everything is already pre-configured as copied from the original object type. So you can modify or remove the mappings which you don't need, or you can use or remove the synchronization configuration which you need and don't you need, and so on. So it's not starting from scratch, but you are starting from object type which has been already created. But I will escape from here because there is a lot of mappings which we would need to customize. Now, queries. So if you were already using MidPoint in the past, you know that it is possible to also ask using the queries. So you can, of course, start using with something very easy, like I hope I have some John, given name equals John. That's quite easy. And let's say, and family name equals Smith. So of course there is only one, or we can just have starts with, because we have two, and so on and so on. Unfortunately, current snapshot doesn't support this completion as I mentioned, but I will show you in Studio that we have it already there. So it is already in progress. The queries can be also more interesting. For example, I have some prepared here. This is searching when you don't care about case sensitivity. Otherwise, the search is case sensitive, of course. So here you can use or ignore case. That means we are not using the case sensitivity. Or what else could be? We can also find some other interesting, for example, given name starting with A and family name not ending with N, and so on. So a lot of things are possible. Let's see something even more interesting. You can also search by a reference. So let's search for everybody who is a person, who is person archetype. So basically everybody except of administrator. So there are many possible queries. One last, which I will show, is also show me all users who have account on AD resource. So that's almost everybody, I think 38 accounts, if I remember. That's everybody except of administrator and 2 former employees. So the queries can be quite complex, yet they are still readable. Okay, maybe the referencing is not something which you will understand immediately, but we have the training, we will have the training, and we have, of course, the documentation. So this is a query. And now I would like to show you MidPoint Studio. So just a second. So this is MidPoint Studio, which I have already created the project, but it is empty. I have not downloaded anything yet. I can show you here when I'm looking for somebody the query completion. You can see given name is being completed, starts with, for example, A, and you can see this is working. So this is the completion, and let's start with the downloading of MidPoint objects. So I will get back from this search and what I would like to download. Let's start with archetype. So I will download the archetype, which is called person. So I will first download this to my project. So this is downloading from MidPoint to my project. You can see it contains a lot of metadata, operation, execution stuff, and so on. So we have not yet cleaned anything. We will do it in a second. What else? Let's try to download both resources. We have two resources here, HR and AD. Let's download all of them to our project. Okay, so we have that. And let's download system configuration object. System configuration, there is only one. Let's download it. Again, we have not done any cleanup. You can see there is metadata in the resource. Maybe I can zoom it a bit. I will just also increase the size of the window. You can see there is a lot of metadata and encrypted data for the password and schema definition. So there is a lot of to clean. So we have downloaded these things, and let's then do some cleanup. So for example, I will open my HR resource, and the cleanup file is here, asking to remove the schema definition. Yes, I want to remove the schema definition. I will zoom it a bit again. And you can see that there is no metadata at this moment. You can see the connector ref doesn't reference OID of the connector anymore, but we have the query for the connector. Also, the schema, the generation constraints, this is still here, but there is no schema definition, so it is cleaned. So this is very easy. So let's start with something more interesting, and that's the Active Directory. So cleanup for our Active Directory resource, again, asking to remove the schema definition. Yes, I want to remove it. And there is one warning, which is displayed here. If I open it, there is a warning because this resource contains reference to user, this is administrator, because he is a correlation administrator for that resource. If you have taken first steps, you know why. So what could I do? I could download this object, but I don't want that. Administrator should not be part of my project. Instead of that, I can click configure missing. And here I see all the references. I can even refresh it to show not OIDs, but the names. And I can see that my Active Directory resource has a reference to user administrator. I don't want to download it, so I will mark it as ignore. And now if I save it, so this is then saved in within the project in the .idea directory. Now, if I do any further cleanup, you can see there is no warning. So MidPoint is no more warning me about missing a dependency for the administrator because we have said we don't care. That's okay. So it will not download this administrator user to our project. That correlator administrator, I wanted to show where it is. Here, this is the reference. That's the correlator administrator for the resource. This is the reference to administrator. So we are no more interested to download administrator user. Okay, so we can do the same for other objects. We have done it for AD, we have done it for HR. So let's do it for system configuration. System configuration cleanup. Now the cleanup has a lot of warnings. Because system configuration, among others, contains references to archetypes and object collections because of the object collection views. And typically you don't want to download them because these are implicit built-in objects in MidPoint. So I can go again to configure missing. I will again refresh the names instead of OIDs. And what I can do is, okay, so my default definition will be, let's ignore everything which is being referenced from system configuration, except I would like to have my security policy because it's different from default. And there are two dashboards which I would like to download. So, okay, I would like to mark it for download. So now if I save it, it will be just marked for a download, not yet downloaded. The newer snapshot version of Studio should have a button to also download it, but I have not updated a week before. So now I have marked these objects for download. So if I now go into notification and download missing, it will download two dashboards and one security policy. So now I can continue. I can clean up archetypes, dashboards, security policies. Cleanup file, I can do it for all directories and their content. There are warnings again because of the links from these objects. So again, I'm doing the configure missing. Let's refresh the names. Again, I don't want to download basically anything unless I say it specifically. So here is from person archetype, there is template, object template. Yes, I want to download it. Then I have dashboards. These are my custom dashboards, not built-in. Okay, download for these dashboards everything to what they reference. These are object collections. So they will be automatically marked. And also there is security policy, which refers to password policy. Yeah, I want to download that again. So I will simply say yes, save it, and download missing. And now you can see we have not just dashboards, but we have also object collections, and we have also the value policy. So now, of course, I will need also to clean up the rest. So object collections, object templates, and value policies, which I have downloaded. And now we are done. There are no more references from there, so they are cleaned. If I open any of them, so for example, the object template, I will get rid of these notifications. You can see there is no metadata. The same for the object collections. There is no metadata. Everything has been cleaned. And of course, for resources, you have already seen that we don't have the reference to the connector and that we don't have the schema. So basically, now we have cleaned the configuration, which can be handled, let's say, automatically. And now there are two more things we can do, and that's the password. So we are in the Active Directory, so I will show it. Let me see in my notes in which order I'm doing that. I will start with associations, if you don't mind. Associations are used in person archetype. Person archetype has inducement. I will get rid of this window. And there is inducement, which contains shadow reference for one specific group. This is not portable, as I said. So what can we do? Here is a special new action in Studio. Replace shadow ref if you are in the expression element, and replace shadow ref will just generate a piece of code with association target search. Currently, at this time, in this snapshot of Studio, it is like almost ready to be used, meaning you need to replace this filter with the real filter. But it's really easy because in our case, it's simply distinguish name. It's simply distinguish name of that group. So now I have converted this query, which was not portable, to something which is portable. Let's upload it to MidPoint and have it there. If I would have more like objects, which I don't have here, I would need to do is know this also here. But after I upload it to MidPoint, now it's portable. Now the password. Password in Active Directory. So I will zoom it again a bit. You can see this yellow background is meaning whatever color is configured in the theme as a warning. If I click here, again, there is this bulb, and you can use a secrets provider. So in order to use secrets provider, I can already prepare the code here, but I need to update the system security for system configuration for that. So I will update the system configuration with something which I have prepared. And I will just copy paste it. This is new feature in MidPoint 4.9. It is configuration of Docker secrets, and I will call it my Docker secrets. So let's upload this to MidPoint. Okay, and where I was in Active Directory, provider name can be now automatically completed. I have clicked Control Space, but if I would simply start writing my Docker secrets, it's being completed. All I need to name to put there a name of the secret from Docker, which in my case is AD password. You can see there is now no password anywhere, and if I upload it, this is also test connection, so it should show you that everything is okay. To double check it, I can go to MidPoint and open the Active Directory resource, connector configuration, And you can see there is no more any password defined, but we are using secret provider. So what you see here is the same as here. We have not replaced the password with its value on upload. So we are referring to this. That Docker secret has caching. So in case you would change the value of the secret and you are using caching in system configuration, then of course the cache will be emptied and the new password would be fetched. But I will not show that in this case. So this is how you can clean the content of the files with the metadata, connector references, the password reference, and association. If I remember, that's the majority of things we are doing. Now I will create a Git repository. So we are here. I will create a local Git repository in this directory, and I will simply put everything there. I will not write any verbose messages. I'm sorry. So I will simply commit this to my local Git. Now, whatever I do in local files, Git diff will help me to show the differences. But what I wanted to, of course, show you is this object synchronization. So how MidPoint can work in situation that you make some changes in user interface and also in XML, and you would like to somehow put it together, not replacing the others. So let's start to, I will prepare for that by making some modification in our HR resource. So I will modify our HR resource, configure. I will change just some basics. So for example, again, I will copy paste description. Description for the object tab will be set in the MidPoint user interface. So I will just save this. This is resource wizard. And also I will make some modification of the mappings. So we have some inbound mappings in our resource. Archived mapping, let's delete it. Another archived mapping, let's delete it. And also, we can also do one other thing. Let's change display name of one of the attributes. We have surname, so let's put their last name. So these are modifications which, of course, we don't have in MidPoint Studio. To make it more complex, I will do modifications in MidPoint Studio for the same resource. So it's HR, and we are in HR object type. This one, I will put their description and I will put their documentation. Now we have two descriptions, one in MidPoint, one in Studio. So we would like to not lose any of them just like that. We would like to decide. So now I will click the new action for the HR. Let's close the other tabs. And that's this one, synchronize objects. So this is the new, completely new thing. I will get rid of this. Now this is being presented like changes, and you can read it as what you would like to apply to your local file from the changes which happened in MidPoint UI. To see it in a more clean way, I will do the cleanup. That means all the metadata will be removed from here, including the schema definition. And now we can see the changes. These are things which are going to be deleted. These are things which are going to be updated. And these are things which are going to be added. So how to read it? We would like to apply some changes to our local file. So what does it mean this? We are in schema handling for object type for HR person description. That's what I made two changes, one local and one in remote. Here you can see before you accept that change, the value is this is the object type for blah, blah, blah. This is the value. And here, I can try to make it a bit wider. Here you can see the value which will be there after. So if I apply this change, then this will be copied here. So, okay, I would like to take that description. So I'm going to accept the change. Now we have documentation. Documentation has been done locally in our file, so it is not in MidPoint. in direction which is currently selected, that means it should be deleted because you don't have it in MidPoint. But this is not something I want because I have deliberately put the documentation element there. So for that case, I can simply say, let's ignore that. Ignore meaning don't do anything with that change. Now we have something which was deleted. What is it? It is in schema handling in object type for HR person, and for attribute empnum, it's inbound mapping, which has been deleted. You can see it here. The mapping which was archived, it is now deleted and will be deleted from our local file. That's okay. I want that. I did deliberately deleted the mapping, so I will accept that change. Now we have some addition. Again, the same object type for HR person, attribute for surname, and display name has been changed. There was no value there, and now there will be a display name with last name. This is what I want. I did it deliberately. Let's accept it. I will skip here to this. This is the second mapping which we deleted because it was already archived. So I will also accept that. That was attribute job and inbound for it. One of them is being deleted. So let's accept that change as well. And now we have three things which are not so much nice, or let's say not so much readable. This means that there are changes in the expressions for that mapping. So it is mapping for attribute status. Name of the mapping is status to lifecycle state. In the expression, and you can see the expression. So this is what you have now before you do anything. And if you accept that change, it would be like this. Actually, you can see there are no real differences. This is just about formatting. As I was originally creating that mapping in user interface by copy pasting, the indenting was lost. So this indenting is like not very readable, but it is really the same. There is no difference. Differences are ignored because we are ignoring white spaces as well as operational data. So here I can decide what I would like to do. Let's say I would like to keep it as it is. So I will ignore the modification. And you can see the same is here. Again, the expressions are the same because differences are ignored, just white space is different. So I can do it. That's attribute the job in the mapping job to title nice. So I can do again, let's say keep it. And the last one which we have here is for country attribute. Name of the inbound mapping is country, remove prefix. Again, this is just about formatting. You can see the indentation. So let's keep it as it is also. Now I have finished, but actually I have not done anything. We have just stored the data in memory. So in case you changed your mind and you would like to get back to whatever was, you just need to select and refresh and everything will be get back because we have not saved, we have not published anything anywhere. But if you are okay with what we have done, we suggest to save the file to your local file. Now, if I go to HR, you can see that Git is showing me the differences, which of course I can see also in the commit window. And you can see that there is the description, which has been a description and the documentation, and you can see the mapping, which was archived, will be deleted, and so everything which we did has been now done only in a local file, and you can see it in Git diff the differences. So you can also check it here. In case you don't like it, you can revert, but in case we like it, we can of course upload this to MidPoint. So now we have the same here and also in MidPoint. And of course, I would merged changes from, I would commit it also to our Git. So now you have seen the object synchronization action, which we hope should help you in deciding which changes you would like to pick up from which side. If you are always doing everything from Studio to MidPoint, then probably this will be not so important for you. If you are always doing everything in GUI and just you would like download that configuration to MidPoint, then again, that's easy. But there will be times where you will probably need to do the same, or you will need to modify something which has been modified like without your knowledge by, let's say, by the customer, and they would like to keep also customers' changes. So that pickup of the changes using object synchronization could help you. I think this is all I wanted to show to finalize this presentation. Intermediate training will extend your MidPoint knowledge and will allow you to streamline support for MidPoint deployment using GitOps. We are not using the GitOps actually, but we are committing the data to Git, which can be then taken. Training will use MidPoint and MidPoint Studio 4.9, as I already mentioned, and group synchronization training is being developed as well, which also will use MidPoint 4.9. So there are two new trainings which are being developed. I would like to thank you for your attention.